Hello, my name is Vasily Starastenko, and this case is about understanding your customer to deliver the best product. In this case, we will use an example of Starlink. It's a broadband internet via satellites built by a space startup SpaceX. This product is so interesting because satellite internet has always been considered as a slow and expensive, but Starlink is kind of challenging both of those assumptions and making it fast and relatively inexpensive. The learning outcomes of this class: you will learn how to describe the customer need and how to understand the customer need. You will learn how to use customer need descriptions for product decisions. You will also learn how to differentiate your product in a competitive marketplace and how to make it stand out from your competitors. Finally, I'll tell you how to sequence product launches and product features for the best impact on your customer happiness and for the best improvement of your product. Now we're going to be talking about SpaceX and their product Starlink, satellite internet, to illustrate how understanding your customer can help you deliver the best product. For context, SpaceX is a space exploration company built on a vision of making life multiplanetary. And on a path to this bold vision, this company learned how to reuse its spaceships, which is a significant innovation in space technology. It has never been the case before. The ships were launched into space only once, and then they were not able to be reused. With SpaceX, they're able to land part of the ship and then reuse it in future launches, this way making technology much less expensive and affordable. Starlink is a new innovative product by the same company, SpaceX, which goes after the market of broadband satellite internet and naturally trying to make this product cheap enough and high quality enough for us everyday users to use it. Again, this has never been the case before. We're using broadband internet over optical wire today, and the satellite internet, while not new, is only used for specific use cases which normally have very high cost. Let's go into understanding the customer needs and what matters in the market for broadband internet. Typically, customers evaluate internet products by comparing them against the following dimensions. 1. How expensive the product is, how expensive the internet is. 2. How fast it works, like how many gigabytes or megabytes of traffic per second can I download. 3. Are there any limitations, like in mobile, for example, you might have 3 or 5 gigabytes of data available to you and then you need to pay more. And then finally, the latest, number 4 dimension is latency, is how long it takes before the information comes back to me. And this number 4 sometimes is less important for our everyday use cases, but for example, in cases like trading, it's very important when people compete on speed of access to the information. Starlink is going to be making an improvement across all of those 4 dimensions as compared to normal satellites, and it's going to be comparable or better than established broadband internet players. The way the company is getting it done is, over the course of the next 10 years, they will be launching tens of thousands of satellites into the air, and those satellites will be orbiting Earth on low orbit, which is different again from the approach with typical satellite companies. They usually launch their satellites on a much higher orbits, which results in much larger latency. At the same time, it helps them service more people at the same time. With Starlink internet, you're going to be able to get the bandwidth comparable to your existing optical connection. It works with a satellite dish that you point into the sky, somewhere into the sky. It doesn't take much setup. It's going to cost roughly about $50, probably between $50 a month and $100 a month, which according to United States prices is relatively low. The typical internet costs much more. And latency is going to be faster than the typical optical channels, which is even more exciting because satellite has always been perceived as slow and high latency product. So that's the introduction, that's the background. Again, in this class about understanding customer needs to deliver the better product, we're going to discuss the case of Starlink, built by SpaceX for fast and cheap internet connection via satellite. Starlink's target customers include consumers and businesses. On the consumer side, there is 7 billion people living on Earth, and more than 50% of them currently do not have access to the internet. Each of those 3.5 billion people obviously is a prospective customer for SpaceX, but the remaining 3.5 billion that arguably do have internet are still prospective customers as well, because they might decide to switch their service into SpaceX. Currently, SpaceX operates a network of 6,000 satellites, and is going to increase its network size to like 40,000 satellites in the next several years, and for that it's launching thousands and thousands of satellites each year with the help of their parent company, SpaceX, today. The beta, which is available today, is marketed as better than nothing beta, which is an innovative marketing which kind of sets expectations for the customers low enough so that they don't complain and they're actually thankful for the experience they're getting. To get access to this beta, you need to put a $500 payment to get access to the satellite dish. And then on top of the satellite dish, you are paying a $99 monthly fee to be a participant of the beta. The way beta works is your satellite dish gets pointed somewhere in the sky. It does not take much configuration, which is, again, somewhat of innovation in the satellite technology industry, because normally satellites do need to be configured and pointed to a particular place in the sky. That's not the case. You just point it somewhere in the sky, and then you just plug it in into your electric circuit, and you get your internet set up. And you can take your satellite, you can put it home, you can take it with you on a trip, you can take it to work if you wish so. The problem with satellite internet historically has been that it was very slow and very expensive. The reason for that is that satellite companies were launching satellites on a high orbit, and there was only a very small number of those satellites available. The approach Starlink has taken to this problem is they studied consumer preferences, and they understood that if satellite internet was close in price to the normal optical broadband internet they currently use in their homes, and if it has the same offering in terms of speed and limits and latency, then the consumers would actually happily switch to this new offering. So what Starlink has done is it used the approach that SpaceX is currently using to space launches, where the spaceships are reusable. And it projected that launching tens of thousands of satellites that are needed for operating such network would not be prohibitively expensive. In fact, it would be quite reasonably priced with the existing cost of the technology SpaceX runs. And again, historically, the broadband companies, the satellite broadband companies could not afford that. The reason they picked the high orbit is because at the high orbit you can service more consumers. But the cost of a high orbit is that the latency is much higher. The signal will be going much further to reach the satellite and back to the consumer. And as a result, the service quality suffers. Again, historically it had been thought prohibitively expensive to launch tens of thousands of satellites at the low Earth orbit for low latency service. But Starlink by SpaceX made it possible. So what we know about consumer preferences is consumers typically care about four things as it relates to their internet. One is the monthly price. One is the speed, how fast data comes to you and leaves your computer. One is the limitations. Is it a limited bandwidth or unlimited? It's normal for the residential internet in the United States that today the bandwidth is not limited, but in mobile it's not quite like that. In mobile there is usually limitations for 1 gigabyte, 5 gigabyte, maybe 10 gigabytes. Finally, the latency is how much time it takes for the signal to, again, leave your device and to reach the satellite or the other side. And the biggest innovation on satellite internet by Starlink as compared to broadband other satellite companies is that the latency is now much lower because of all of those tens of thousands of satellites orbiting Earth at a low orbit. So as a result, the problem of getting consumers a fast and inexpensive satellite internet was solved by Starlink, using the SpaceX technology, which made it possible to launch tens of thousands low orbit satellites at reasonable cost, and to make internet available to, again, up to billions, up to 3.5 billion people who are currently not connected. There are multiple limitations to launching satellites into the sky and to running a satellite network by Starlink. Some of those limitations can be classified as technological, customer, or environmental. Let's consider some examples of those. On technology side, it's hard to launch satellites into the sky. It's hard and expensive. It's also hard and expensive to maintain a network of tens of thousands of satellites in the air and deliver high-quality service to consumers. It has never been done before. That's the risk factor and the limitation that needs to be taken into account. On the customer side, there is customer preferences, which on the one hand, in surveys, consumers are telling us that if the satellite internet is as expensive or cheaper and as fast or faster than the broadband, then they will willingly switch. At the same time, this has never been done before. We know that today consumers are using broadband internet via optical cable. They're often not happy about the quality or price, but it still is a big risk whether consumers are going to be willing to switch. Finally, on the environmental side, the problems which SpaceX and Starlink are facing are also significant because it is environmentally risky to launch satellites in the space. It's also environmentally risky to retire those satellites once they're done with their service and they need to be landed back safely or they need to be destroyed in the atmosphere. In addition to those challenges, there was additional limitation or risk that satellites by SpaceX are now so visible in the sky that they might prevent some additional research by astronomers, etc. And those risks and limitations might also have to be managed in the future. For example, the color of the satellites and the material of the satellites might need to be changed, which will represent additional constraints and limitations for the business. SpaceX needs trillions of dollars to make life multiplanetary according to its main vision. To deliver on this vision, SpaceX believes that Starlink Internet could be one source of resources for the company and could be producing at scale up to 30 billion or possibly up to 100 billion in incremental, in recurring annual revenue that will allow SpaceX parent company to invest those resources in its main goal of making life multiplanetary. That said, Starlink has several kinds of goals. One goal is to drive massive cash flow for its parent company to help its primary goal of launching spaceships into other planets. And then in addition to those financial goals, the Starlink has a goal of connecting billions of consumers, like roughly 3.5 billion people who are not connected to the internet, connecting them and offering them faster and lower cost service as compared to what today is normal in the market. On its path to making satellite internet inexpensive and available to billions of consumers worldwide, Starlink has delivered on a number of milestones. First, it has launched thousands of satellites into space. Currently, it operates a network of 6,000 satellites. Second, it launched an online sign-up flow to become a beta customer with a waitlist. Each person on the waitlist is currently expected to pay $99 fee to join a waitlist, and by some estimates, this way the company produced hundreds of millions of dollars of cash. It cannot be called revenue yet because those customers have not received service, but it's an incremental cash that company can be using for its space launches and product innovation. Next, the company has launched a beta service for actual customers to actually use its product with its satellites, and they branded this beta service as Better Than Nothing Beta. The great thing about this is there are several benefits to this. First, by doing this type of branding, the company only attracted the most willing to experiment consumers, right? Like the consumers who are expecting high quality right away will probably not go and buy Better Than Nothing beta, so only consumers who are ready to experiment and not expecting the best quality service are engaging in this trial. This is great for SpaceX because those customers are more tolerant to possible service issues, and they will still be able to provide some high quality feedback, But at the same time, they will not be putting too much negative feedback out there, and they will not hurt the company in the marketplace with too much negative feedback. And then finally, in terms of action, the company is progressing full speed on launching additional satellites to get to 40,000 satellites orbiting the Earth in a low orbit within the next several years, and to remove any limitations on beta and to make service available to all the consumers worldwide. The key insight that resulted in the vision of Starlink to create satellite internet experience available to billions of people is the current dissatisfaction of customers with status quo as it relates to satellite internet. The satellite internet of today is expensive and slow. In fact, it's not used by consumers for everyday needs. For the everyday needs, the consumers are mostly relying on broadband optical connection, and satellite is remaining as a pretty small size use case for specific needs. Next, one insight that's made Starlink more successful is launching beta and marketing this beta as better than nothing beta. The great approach, the thing that made this great is that it allowed some customers to opt out of this beta if they expect too high quality as compared to what can be delivered. But on the opposite, it makes incentives for technology enthusiasts and for early adopters to start trying the service and help company fine-tune its offering and improve faster. Next, the product insights on launches. The fact that you need to launch a smaller sized beta early on and to not wait until you have all the tens of thousands of satellites in the sky is smart and insightful. In a way, it allows you to de-risk your product and also to start funding it earlier because those customers are coming with additional sorts of funds. And then finally, the product vision is again probably the biggest insight in this case, is that when done right, there is no single reason why satellite internet cannot be mainstream. The only reason it's not used by us today is it's just not good enough. It's not cheap enough and it's not fast enough. So the biggest insight in this case is when you can improve the product in a way that makes it better than all competing products on variables, on dimensions that matter to consumers, you can be successful, and you can be successful at a global, large scale and be able to be used by billions of people. The key lessons I expect you to learn from this case are as follows. First, always start with your customer. You first need to understand what your customer values, what they like, what they don't like, before you can go into the problem definition and ultimately delivering the product. Do not start with sizing the market. Do not start with competitive analysis, and do not start with technology. Those are not the right places to start. You always understand your customer first, and that allows you to deliver better experience and to craft a better problem statement. Next, learn about the problem space before making a large investment. In the case of Starlink and SpaceX had years and years of experience launching spaceships in the space, and it did it for multiple companies, so it was able to experiment and fine-tune its products to a level where it knows the economics really well, and it knows that launching 10,000 satellites for its own product will be reasonably priced for the amount of revenue that it expects from it. Without this massive information from the market, this project would be a lot more risky and in fact might not have happened. Next, define key attributes and key dimensions of your product that consumers value, and then fine-tune the experience to make it specifically good along those dimensions, because some of the things you might think are important, consumers disagree, and improving on those dimensions is less critical. In case of Starlink Internet, those dimensions are the cost, how much you pay for your internet, the bandwidth, how much traffic you can get per second, the limitations, am I getting limited service or unlimited, and ultimately the latency. How much time does it take for the signal to leave my computer and reach the satellite and then come back from the satellite to my computer? Fourth, it's a key lesson of this class that launching products in phases, in sequence, is a very good idea when there is multiple risks and there is a sizable cost associated with each phase. In case of SpaceX and Starlink, the launching better than nothing beta is essential for their success because they can test customer risks. They can validate whether customers would even use the service or not. They can validate the technology risks. Is the service quality high as expected? And they can better prepare for the wave of new customers as the service keeps scaling. Also, the launch of the waitlist is very smart and essential because it helps you to get access to free funding, which is quite important in cases when you need large amount of funds to launch your technology. And final, fifth learning is that it helps when you build a competitive advantage, like a substantial, sustainable competitive advantage over years, which competitors cannot easily replicate. In case of Starlink and SpaceX, SpaceX was successful in launching multi-use reusable spaceships, and this competitive advantage has been built over a course of multiple years, and it's a sustainable and pretty major advantage in driving down the cost of launches. As it relates to building a vast network of tens of thousands of satellites, this competitive advantage comes handy and it makes company protected from possible new entrants in the marketplace.